Labadiena, esu Miroslava Januškevič, man tenka didelė garbė vesti šią unikalią vaizdo konferenciją. Be galo malonu pasveikinti plačią tarptautinę auditoriją, kuri susirinko šiandien dalyvauti konferencijoje skirtoje Europos ateičiai. Ja surengė parlamentinė Europos konservatorių ir reformuotojų grupė. Šis susitikimas yra unikalus, nes vyksta pandemijos metu. Būtent dėl to konferencijos dalyviai ir klausytojų auditorija negalėjo susirinkti
participants in the audience were unable to gather in one room, but it didn't stop us from meeting in order to exchange ideas about the future of Europe. So we will take advantage of the potential of modern communication technologies. This is already the 7th conference in a joint series of joint meetings. It is organized by the European Conservative and Reformist Group as part of the campaign entitled The Future of Europe, the New Hope. This time, the event takes place in Vilnius, and this is the ECR group's response to the current situation in the European Union, and it is a call for reform. Experts and political leaders from across Europe will look for answers to the questions of whether and how the European Union should change. It's all in the interest of the European community. The organizers divided today's meeting into parts. The topic of the first part is the future of Europe, the Europe of Homeland, and the second topic is the future of Europe is the Europe of Christian values. In both the first and the second panels, the speakers will give their views, and we will also spend time on questions from the audience. The conference organizers and speakers expect feedback from the audience. We want as many citizens as possible to engage in the discussion and voice their views on the future of Europe. I therefore invite everyone to take an active part in the discussion, to contact us through social networks and questions and comments. Please use the hashtags that you see on the screen on Twitter, YouTube, and Facebook accounts. So let us launch a discussion on the future of Europe. I am delighted to present the first participant of our meeting, Mr. Raffaele Fitto, the co-chairman of the European Conservative and Reformist Group, an Italian MEP. We kindly ask Mr. Fitto to give a welcome address.
Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Vilnius and Lithuania. The new hopeful event of the ECR Future of Europe tour. In meetings and discussions of political, academic and civil society, we will continue the discussions about Europe's future prospects, which began last December in Warsaw, where the opening event of the tour took place. The current European Union, due to the form it has assumed and policies imposed by certain ideological provisions, is no longer able to respond effectively to the challenges that have arisen. Indeed, today's Europe has digressed far away from its founding vision as very different from the project which was enthusiastically joined in early 2000 by Lithuania and other countries that have experienced decades of communist oppression. Our parliamentary group has always stated the need to reform the European Union by building a Europe that is less but much better and fully guided by the treaties which establish the supremacy of the principles of proportionality, competence and subsidiarity. Such Europe, taking into account the prerogatives of individual member states and their differences, would put economic growth and development at the forefront of its policy, promoting employment, the security of its borders, the realism of the euro, defend values and common origins, build on cooperation between sovereign member states. From the outset, all European nations have been the foundation for our political action, which we must continue today even more decisively and even more forcefully. For we have to resist the attempts by certain political forces to impose decisions from above, the aspirations to take an even greater share of the sovereignty of states, and to pursue the federalist agenda of building a superstate. In an attempt to achieve these goals, they are holding a conference on the future of Europe in the coming months. That conference raised serious doubts from the outset. It is hard to believe that its intended format would create the right conditions for dialogue. There will be no shortage of real dialogue today, as in previous events. We will hear valuable ideas and insights that will encourage us to continue our activities. Before proceeding to the debate, on behalf of myself and the parliamentary group as a whole, I would like to thank Mr. Tomaszewski and his electoral action of Poles in Lithuania for organizing the event and making an important contribution to our activities in Brussels. At the same time, I welcome all my colleagues and rapporteurs, wish us a fruitful conference and hope that we will be able to meet live next time to extend this debate. Thank you very much. Many thanks to Mr. Rafael Fito, co-chairman of the European Conservative and Reformist Group. We continue the conference. We have political meetings ahead of us and after their discussion. I'd like to present what it's going to look like. We will be talking to experts, politicians for the next 60 minutes. It will be a civil society discussion about the future of Europe. So we are joined by MEP Waldemar Tomaszewski, the chair of EAPL-CFA. Good afternoon, and we will give a floor to our special guest. We are remotely joining the Polish MEP, Professor Zdzisław Krasnobebski, the president of the ECR Institutional Policy Working Group.
Labą dieną, dzień dobry, witamy pana bardzo serdecznie. Mums labai malonu jūs matyti čia, gaila, kad ne su mumis studijoje, tačiau mes visi suprantame, kad yra pandemija ir mes esam priversti.
We unfortunately have to work remotely and to adapt to the circumstances. So my first question to the MEP, Professor Mr. Krasnobebski, is who is the president of the ECR Institutional Policy Working Group? What role was played by the Christian values on the construction of the Europe that we know today? Thank you very much for the question. I have to admit that the Poles have a sincere point of being in Vilnius, and we are celebrating an important date, the constitution of the 3rd of May, which is common for both of us. Christianity created the foundation for our civilization. Before becoming Europeans, we were Christians, Western Christians, Christianitos, the notion which meant our identity, our unity, our community, the community of our nations, and there is no doubt that Europe was developing, sometimes fighting Christianity. However, Christian notions and the perception of Christianity have to be reflected in the axiology of the European Union, because it is the civilization of life and benevolence. And it is clear from the people's perception, a slightly different perception than political or ideological trends, because sometimes they differ from Christianity, sometimes it's transcendent, sometimes people who were created by God are not just a social construct. It's a construct that does not depend on others. So our law that stems from our relation with the Lord, from transcendental notions, rather than other people who have to shape us, seems to be a digression from the perception of the Lord and the man as such. And it is one of the reasons of the political crisis faced today. Therefore, our political agenda calls us to come back to the Christian values which were the basis of the European integration process. What we have to remember, the ideas of Schuman and Gasparov, and the evidence of that. Thank you. Thank you very much. I would like to ask the same question to the MEP Valdemar Tomaszewski. So, what role was played by the Christian values on the construction of the European that we know today? 2,000 years ago, Europe started creating a new civilization. That civilization was based on the Old Testament, Greek culture, and Roman law. And this civilization became the power, not only in military terms, but in terms of architecture, technology. Namely, in Europe, the first universities were established, and they were the cradles of civilization. They spread into other continents, so we have to know what our Christian roots are, because we will not have any future. As St. Paul II said, if the nation does not know its past, it does not have any future. Thank you very much for your answer. And I would like to ask one more question to Professor Krasnodemski. The question is, Mr. Professor, is it necessary to look back to our past when building the Europe of the future?
Pan poseł Tomaszewski, kolega z parlamentu, zacytował Jana Pawła.
Mr. Tomaszewski is the colleague in the European Parliament, and he cited John Paul II. Memory is very important, of course, but we all should speak that individual life does not have an identity if we don't take the past into account. Sometimes we say that our society is sick and that sometimes we should refuse our past. Sometimes it's said that we shouldn't look back, but the past is the basis for creating our people, developing our people. We have to create a future which is full of hope. And we have to do it taking into account the past and the values which shaped our lives. And only this will make us what we are today. Of course, there are certain differences, there are things that we should not be proud about, but we certainly should be proud about our past because it is the foundation of our future. Europe will be a continent which should be in line with the culture which has been shaped throughout the centuries. Thank you very much. Thank you for your response, and we will start our debate in a while. We will speak about what should be done in order to make Europe into the Europe of homelands.
The ECR Group is the voice of Eurorealism, the sensible middle way between ever more Europe and no Europe, with respect for the sovereignty of Europe's national democracies, with less bureaucracy, more fiscal responsibility, and equality for all member states. We believe the peoples of Europe want the European Union to do less and to do it better, to promote economic recovery and growth and more jobs, to help, not hinder our countries in getting immigration under control, to deliver a clean environment at a cost we can afford, to work with global partners to protect our security, to create jobs through free and fair trade. Europe should only act where it can deliver real added value to member states and their citizens. By putting Europe's national democracies back in the driving seat, we can build a Europe that will offer our countries a platform for cooperation, that will help promote European prosperity and security for generations to come.
Mes grįžtame į studiją.
Let's go back to the studio.
Pristatau
I would
konferencijos
like to
dalyvius.
introduce
Mumis
the participants of the
studijoje
debate, of the panel. Mr. Valdemar Tomaszewski, MEP, the leader of the electoral action of Poles in Lithuania. We have also Mr. Valdemar Urban, who joined us, the vice chairman of the electoral action of Poles in Lithuania. Hello, very nice to see you. Before giving the floor to you, I would like to emphasize that the ECR faction understands that the opinion of citizens is very important, and that's why we had a reporter asking them what Europe they imagine. Robert Schuman, one of the creators of Europe, said once that in Europe, democracy in Europe will be Christian or not at all. Actually, the changes that are related to values takes place very quickly in Europe. And there are different development scenarios of Europe. We are talking about different directions of this development. And that's why it is very important to ask our citizens how they see the future of Europe. And we have asked people of Vilnius this question. Vilnius has been famous for its multiculturalism, multilingualism. What do you think? Should Europe be a federation or a union of independent states? Hello, I would compare Europe to a school class, since I'm a teacher. I would compare Europe to the functioning of a lesson. I believe that Europe would be successful if it works as a successful lesson where all the pupils are engaged and everybody can express their opinions freely and contribute to the success of the lesson, and everybody cooperates. So I consider this model a successful model of a lesson where everybody is involved and engaged and we have a joint result. And I think that this model would suit perfectly to European Union. I think that we should be looking for a golden middle between these two options. What values should be important for Europeans in order to have a successful future? Well, for European citizens, I think such values would be important, such as being like a family, equal rights, so that we wouldn't prioritize certain countries like in Eurovision, so that we have equality, so that we are as a family, we are as strong as a fist, and we would help each other. I think that the most important values are unity, support, and representing these values. We have various political conflicts, moral issues, so it's very nice when these issues are solved in unity. I think for Europeans, two values should be important. One value is respect for yourself, for people of your ethnic background, and respect to people of other ethnic backgrounds, and and Europe should function as unity, as an alliance on certain questions. The values are Christian values, cooperation. I think that the biggest value is family. The family where children are born, where they are raised, because children are our future, not only our future, they are the future of Lithuania, of Europe, of the world. It all depends on children, so children should be taken care of. And I think that family is the most important and the strongest place where children can grow happily and create a strong future of Europe. So this is the future of Europe that that our citizens dream of. And I would like to give the floor to Mr. Tomaszewski, MEP, to express his opinion. Well, there has been a lot of said. Our citizens, Lithuanian citizens, express a lot of views. They said that family is important, yes, but probably we will talk about Christian values more during our second panel. Now the question is why we should create Europe as a Europe of homelands and not like as a federation. The answer is obvious. Schuman and Adenauer said that they are creating the Europe of nations. That was their idea. Unfortunately, now this idea is forgotten. And there are people who are creating some mysterious federation. I think it's a big mistake. We in the Central and Eastern Europe understand it perfectly. That is a big mistake because the federation was already created, the Soviet Union. How did it end up? No values, no God, nothing. Finally, it collapsed. So I don't think that we should repeat the mistakes. We should create Europe of homelands. That was the initial idea of Schuman, Adenauer, and other creators of Europe. Thank you very much for your opinion.
Now I would like to address to Mr. Urban. What do you think about it? What the European Union needs is to create a very clear, transparent legal system, including election system. This means that member states and their governments have to commit by law, be committed by law and not to take unilateral decisions, and the citizens should be able to appeal against unfair decisions. And as do the electoral system and democratic elections, which is the fundamental value of each state, it's very important to state several things. So elections have to be transparent, they must be unlimited with regard to the right of vote and legitimate. And every citizen should have a right to appeal against the results of elections and to expect of an impartial judgment from the court. Only in this case, the supremacy of law may be put in place and the electoral system and the democracy would be in place. Thank you very much to Valdemar Urban for his response. And now I would like to introduce the guests from abroad, Mr. Zbigniew Kuźmiak, MEP, the representative of PIS from Poland. Also Patryk Jaki, MEP, Solidarna Polska representative from Poland. I would like to remind you that we discussed the Europe of homelands, why it is important and why it's important for the states to go back to their individuality and to recover it. Now may I address the MEP Zbigniew Kuźmiuk. Could you please share your opinion, and you have 1 minute for that. I hope that 1 minute will be enough. May I greet you sincerely. So, law and justice is for Europe of homelands. Firstly, because we focus on economic union and want to retain cultural and political differences. And the European Union should be shaped along these lines. And if it is related to the main freedoms and rights, we have seen lately that, namely, the provision of services and movement of services has been limited, where Europe became more competitive. Now we want to refuse these differences by means of legal acts. Recently, there is a concept that we should have more of Europe, and the slogan has become more popular. but we can see that the result of putting it into practice is just Great Britain. It's the answer to the question. So the Great Britain decided to exit the EU because of this larger Europe, more of Europe. Thank you for your response, and now let's start our debate. May I now address Mr. Valdemar Tomaszewski? You started at the start of this meeting that Europe should be the Europe of homelands, and the fathers of the European community say the same, but the current leadership diverge from this opinion. Is this trend dangerous for the European Union, or can we still do something about it? Yes, it is dangerous, and I have already provided a very particular example. The Soviet Union, a federation, we know the result. We had one nation, the Soviet nation. We had a lot of conflicts. The welfare was not ensured there, and the federation was created by forgetting the God. It was a wrong path which led to the collapse. And the founding fathers spoke about the Europe as the Europe of nations. It should be strong because of its diversity, and there are a lot of good examples in the history of Europe when such a union on the basis of Christianity led to great achievements. And one of the examples is the battle in 1683 when the Osmanian Empire fought the battle, and four armies, the Polish, German, Austrian, and Hungarian armies, won against the Muslim invasion. And Christianity was the leader in this battle, and the king Jan Sobieski of that time said that we came, we saw, and the Lord won. So the faith is the foundation. Thank you very much. And let's go back to Poland. And I would like to address Mr. Patrick Jaki, the representative of PIS. Solidarna Polska, I'm sorry. What do you see the future of Poland?
Thank you very much for your invitation and for your question and for the opportunity to participate in this roundtable. I'm very happy to be able to express my view and opinion in your forum, although remotely. I'm very happy that Valdemar has organized such a nice discussion. Now, going back to your question, the situation looks like that recently in Europe there are two parallel processes which are very dangerous. On the one hand, the process of federalization. On the other hand, the process of the wars of culture and cosmopolitization. In the axiological sphere, they want us to take on a different mentality, different thinking. When comparing these processes with the development of the United States, we can see that the processes in Europe take place through conquering and not through the respect of each other and without listening to each other. Especially the cultural revolution has become very obvious because, for example, if Poland and Hungary have a different opinion about the axiology and Christianity, so for these countries are threatened to take away the funding or everything that is guaranteed by the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union. So I think if that continues, other countries will exit the European Union, not only the UK. If you remember the arguments that were used during the Brexit campaign, the arguments were, for example, the supremacy of competence, hyperinflation, legal hyperinflation, too many agencies, the court rulings that were not in line with the canons of the UK law. So my question is whether these arguments were the most important for the Brexit, and whether these arguments are becoming stronger or weaker. I think that the European Union, European Union as the mechanism of a federation, is questioned. So that would be it. That would be my minute. Thank you very much. That was a bit longer than a minute, but thank you very much. That was the contribution of MEP Mr. Patrick Jaki, and we're going back to the discussion. And the question goes to Mr. Kuzmiuk. I would like to ask you, as an economist, in your opinion, what would the economic cooperation look like in Europe? Should that be decided by Brussels or by member states? Should member states be able and have the opportunity to have more freedom in terms of the economic relations? Well, in my first contribution, I emphasized 4 freedoms which guaranteed economic welfare and social welfare in Europe, as well as welfare of the new member states that joined the EU in 2014. So these freedoms were a precondition for the development and economic welfare, and we should focus on them more. I also spoke about the problem that has become very prominent recently. We are in a situation where Western countries have a competitive advantage, for example, free capital and freedom of goods, and there are no limitations or restrictions. And in the Central and Eastern Europe, for example, if we're more competitive, for example, in providing services, transportation, for example, so if in that case we are accused of social dumping, so we have to go back to the negotiations table, and we have to once again emphasize the 4 freedoms that contributed to economic and social potential of Europe. In other words, we should take advantage of the common area. Of course, the situations might be different. The bigger economies win more, and smaller economies win less. But if there are economic restrictions, by only paying attention to the interests of big countries, all European Union will lose. And that's why we will see more problems. And if we react to the fact that there are more competences should be transferred to Brussels, I think this road leads to nowhere. The British in the referendum have noticed that, and they have exited the structure. I think that this is a road to nowhere. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for your opinion. And now, very briefly, I would like to ask Mr. Patrick Jaki, MEP, who represents Poland. An opinion exists that the sources of federalization use the European Union law, especially the Court of Justice of the European Union, to restrict the sovereignty of the European member states. As a lawyer, what is your opinion? Well, this is not a question of evaluation. This is a question of facts that are used as tools of political battle. We are seeing less common sense and more tools that are addressed against certain countries. Certain court rulings become ridiculous, and no law can understand them. So we are now in the process of judgeocracy, and it would be very difficult to substantiate certain decisions, certain rulings that stem from the Treaty of Functioning of the EU. And the competences are divided into three parts. In terms of the national, let's say, competence, and in spite of the three divisions, the European Union now interferes into all of them. The last ruling of the European Court of Justice regarding the tour of coal mines, and that coal mining location spot was responsible for 10% of the extraction of coal in Poland, and there was no legal justification for that. If we have to adopt a just decision, we have to take the opinions and hear both parties. Another ridiculous example is that the ruling against Romania, where the European Court of Justice said that their rulings are superior to the decisions made in the member states, and that's against the provisions of the Treaty of Functioning. The ridiculous situation stems from the fact that the French government, the French government addressed and asked the judges about the enforceability of the decisions, because there was an issue of the personal data security, and we see that this system is crazy, and if it is not stopped, we will be in a situation where the European Court of Justice makes decisions on behalf of politicians. Of course, that will be, under the cover of independent decisions. So I think there is a huge threat, and we all sometimes forget to take that into account. Thank you very much for specific examples. And that was the opinion of MEP Patrick Jaki. And I would like to ask Mr. Waldemar Urban. You are the specialist of election procedures. So local ethnicities in European countries, they make up 10% of population. So should election system be more adapted to citizens that belong to ethnic and language minorities, and if that's possible at all? Well, that's a very good question. It's very important to emphasize that the European Union follows international standards, and the international standards have to be followed by all countries that consider themselves democracies. International welfare and the practice of elections is very important. We also have the OECD, which performs the function of observing the elections. So here we see that in the European Union and in the world, there are a lot of mechanisms and enough, let's say, documents of how to protect ethnic minorities. However, the problem begins when these documents have to be enforced in practice. Speaking of Lithuania, during every elections, for example, elections to the parliament, we always have international observers, for example, the experts of OECD. They come and observe the elections, and then they publish reports with the recommendations which have to be incorporated into the national law if they want to be a country where elections are independent and transparent. So OECD experts it is always recommended that decisions have to be made so that elections are much more facilitated for representatives of ethnic minorities. But this process is not that simple. Doesn't take place that efficiently. So I would say that there are enough documents that are that could take care of the ethnic minorities, but the problem is in the attitudes of the countries, because and the maturity of democracies. Some democracies are more mature, and other countries are less mature, and it just takes time.
Thank you very much for your intervention and your opinion. We had Valdemar Urban's opinion here. May I thank all of you for your answers. May I thank our guests from Poland. And we would like to thank for the invitation, and may I congratulate all in the studio and welcome all those who are observing our debate in Brussels. And now I would like to introduce the topic of the second part. The future of Europe is the Europe of Christian values. Let's have a look at the screen.
Sin fe, no habría Europa.
La liberté est le fondement de l'Europe.
Respekt für das gemeinsame Erbe.
Tradition binds our continent.
Non c'è valore più importante della famiglia.
Europa jest dobrem wspólnym. Różnimy się, ale powinno nas łączyć wspólne dziedzictwo. Powróćmy do Unii Europejskiej, która z tego dziedzictwa wyrasta i która szanuje narodowe tożsamości. Only the European Union without arrogance, based on solidarity and mutual respect for its member states, can regain the support of the European nations. We can do it together.
We are continuing our conference. I welcome the participants of the second part of the debate. In it, we will focus on our shared future and heritage. The discussion is attended by the members of the Lithuanian Parliament. I'm very pleased to present the member of the Parliament, Rita Tamošiūnienė, the representative of EAPL-CFA. Good afternoon. And we will communicate remotely with two other members of the Parliament, also representatives of EAPL-CFA, Beata Petkevich and Czesław Olszewski. Good afternoon. It's a great pleasure to introduce you. And viewers, could you please use the hashtags you see on the screen for Twitter, Facebook, and YouTube. In the first part, we spoke about Europe of homelands, and today we will speak about the future of Europe, the Europe of Christian values. So it's very interesting what our panelists think of it. We often think about the weakening of Christianity in Europe, about the crisis of Christian values. Are Christian values important for Europe? And I would like now to give the floor to Mrs. Rita Tamošiūnienė, member of the Lithuanian Parliament. Thank you very much. Of course, these values matter because they form the basis for Europe. I would like to emphasize that we should speak about the universality of these Christian values and their comprehensiveness, because they are to be cherished by every person in order to contribute to the creation of the general good. It's important to note that the young generation of Europeans should take over from us not only knowledge and knowledge about the Christian values, but also the perception that the main things of our existence, like life, dignity, and marriage, form the basis for our societies, and these are natural to us, and they contribute and expand us. And I would like to avoid very broad concepts such as Christian values, because young people should understand that we should speak about a loving and creative person, because if you don't identify yourself with your activity or with the environment, is just a connotation or an additional context, but it's not in the essence of life. Values are very important for the development of our societies. Thank you very much. It was Mrs. Rita Stamušūnienė's opinion, and I would like to ask Mrs. Beata Petkevich for her opinion on that. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for the possibility to participate in this conference. The European Union today is based on 3 pillars: economy, security policy, cooperation, justice, and internal affairs. But we shouldn't forget that Roman law is the foundation, and the democracy and Christianity enshrined there, which is integral. And since we have 2 heritages, secular and Christian, in Europe, we see that secularism has started meaning not only diverging from church, but we can't imagine the equality without the impact of church. St. John Paul was also cited today already, and it's very important to come back. Although the Pope doesn't say directly how to deal with problem of social issues, but he provides with moral provisions which help people to create a society where dignity of each person is respected, and it will allow to build the world on the foundations of Christian love. Thank you very much for your intervention. It was the opinion of Beata Petkevich, the member of the Lithuanian Parliament, and I would like to address the member of the Lithuanian Parliament, Czesław Olszewski, and ask him what he thinks about it. Good afternoon to all the participants of this conference. I would like to emphasize and point out that the future of Europe will depend on our lives, on the way we live, and what our values are as the family, as the government, and so on. And I believe that the role model would be the saint family from Nazareth. And it is the school which teaches the members of the family to help each other, respect each other, understand each other, and to provide each family member with a full life, because only the strong family is the basis for harmonious society, strong state, and it is support for a strong family of European countries. The electoral action of Poles in Lithuania, the Christian Families Allowance, is based on Christian values, because all people are the children of the Lord, and we are all equal in front of Him. We are like all big family, and we support traditional families as the main cell of the society. Thank you very much. This was an intervention by the member of Lithuanian Parliament, Mr. Czeslaw Olszewski. Thank you very much for all the panelists for their interventions, and we will start the debate in a short while. And I would like to give the floor to the MEP Waldemar Tomaszewski, the leader of EAPL CFA. Thank you very much for participation, for your ideas, and it's obvious to everyone that our organization, our party, the Christian Families Alliance, tells by its name about the values and the direction we are taking. And of course, in our activities, we build on these values, and our symbols also represent our values. I will show our symbols. Maybe not all members of our fraction know these symbols or understand them. So what you can see here is our logo. And we understand fairly well that it is a traditional family. Our organization and our fraction in the European Parliament fight for traditional family based on marriage between a man and a woman, and with the children, boys and girls. And we have the sign of fish. It represents the Christ's actions and the symbol of the Jesus Christ itself, because in Greek, fish is ichthys. And the first letters tell about everything. In Greek, it's Jesus Christ your supper, and in Lithuanian, it says the Jesus Christ, the Son of God. So Europe should be strong with its Christian values and Christian roots. Without it, we will have no future. As the founder of the European Union said, Robert Schuman, that the democracy in Europe will be Christian or not at all. So it's very important that parties which try to cherish Christian values understand that. However, this is what is lacking in current European Union, in certain states, including our state, because we digress from Christian values. They speak against traditional families, they speak against religion lessons in schools. Although this was the core of Europe, we would have been conquered by other civilizations if we had not adhered to these values. We should remember that all Christians should unite and support those who are for Christian values very strongly. So Europe, as the union of European nations, is the basis for our alliance. Thank you very much. Thank you for your statement. And now we start the debate.
And the question goes to the member of the parliament, Ms. Tomaszonina. There are voices that currently there is a battle in Europe for the soul of the young generation. Gender ideology, what do you think? Should schools carry out the curricula based on traditional values? Well, I could say that the development of a mature personality belongs on the curriculum that is implemented. Of course, gender ideology is misleading in terms of the vision of a person, and it should not be present in the curriculum. It is against the Christian anthropology. Also, it penetrates brutally into the Western culture. Speaking of the educational system, in our country, a lot of citizens in our country are Roman Catholics, so we should start from the curriculum. As parents, we should require from schools to ask a question: where our children are going to spend the majority of the time, in what settings. And we should demand that the religious education should be such as we imagine it to be. For example, now the general trend makes a lot of influence to the Catholics. In the US, there was a study carried out, and it turns out that 68% of Catholics support the rights of transgender people, and that gender is not determined by birth, and that reflects the general trends and not the Catholic education. So I wouldn't like to see such results of the survey in Europe or in Lithuania. So that is important that school leaders, teachers are ready to respond to the threats and challenges of gender ideology and should be able to identify which curricula are beneficial to pupils and should not buy in such ideologies. It is important that the European Commission and the European Parliament raise this question as well about the implementation of such curriculum, especially in Catholic countries. Thank you very much for your opinion. That was the opinion of Rita Tamošūnienė, member of the Lithuanian Parliament. I have a question to Mr. Valdemar Tomaševski, MEP. Robert Schuman said that democracy in Europe will be Christian or not at all. So what role Christian values play in modern Europe? Well, we have positive examples that we have mentioned also in our ECR faction, but there are countries where these values are not important. And so, for example, the most recent information, there was a report in France, and also it was shown in other countries, that a Catholic procession was assaulted. So what do we have to say? It's the 21st century European Union, and a procession, like a demonstration, it was attacked by extreme leftists. In France itself, for almost 100 years, have not been receiving lessons of religious education. So there is no surprise that Muslim ideology prevails in certain districts of France, and we should resist that in a peaceful manner. Through elections, through voting, we have to show good examples. We have to, first of all, unite people who have the same or similar thinking. Christianity is the basis of our continent. So we have to encourage people to actively participate in elections, to have the representatives. Of course, there's another threat, let's say, of globalization, but there are certain actions that can be that are organized by extreme leftist organizations, and so that happened because our continent has always been tolerant. And we can talk about this for hours, but if we are not united, if we do not show a direction together, then I think the future of Europe may be very sad. I gave you an example of the Soviet Union. What was their ideology? There's no God. Human beings are smart enough, and we can organize ourselves. But this is not possible. The Lord is very important, and And another problem is purely political. Sometimes votings take place based on ideology in Europe. For example, on the right side, we have the Christian Democrats, EPP, the biggest faction in the parliament. It's a Christian democratic faction, and half of the members of this faction vote against the birth or in favor of birth control, against the life. So I don't understand that. They think one way, they do a different thing, and I think with the support of the Lord, we will be strong as a continent. Thank you very much. We will continue the discussion. I have questions to you, and our viewers also ask questions. The first question is for you, Mr. Tomaszewski. This is a question by Mr. Jonas Bielunas. Dear MEP, is the faction that you belong to, is for this faction the values of Christianity important? And you suggest going back to Christian roots. Is it possible in Europe where liberal democrats prevail? Well, I would say that with the support of the Lord, everything is possible. These questions are related, the values, the Europe of nations. We have to understand that Christianity is the basis of our continent. Christianity made our continent strong. We have been, and we still are the strongest continent in terms of the culture, civilization, and we have spread our knowledge to other continents. But there is a threat that this strength of our continent will end. It's very important to follow and live your life according to the Gospels and with the support of the Lord. Thank you very much. I have a question to Ms. Beata Petkevich. There's a question to Petkevich from the audience. A question to you as a politician. Should Christians be involved in politics, and if yes, why? Thank you very much for an interesting question. Yes, I think indeed Christians should be involved and engaged in politics because they have to take responsibility for where the society is going, which way they're going to go. Pope Francis said that a good Christian has to participate in politics. Politics has a huge influence on worldview during the elections, and politicians, with their behavior, they create social norms. And if there is no place in this chain for those people who follow Christian values, where will the world go? We will be able to ensure the future if we leave it to those to whom values are not important, Christian values are not important, such as justice, family, and equality. So yes, definitely, they should participate in politics. Thank you very much. That was the response by the member of the Lithuanian Parliament, Beata Petkevich. And now a question to Mr. Olszewski from Darius Baršauskas. Lithuanian Poles are very well organized. We have as many as 10% of schools with where the language of instruction is Polish. What is the attitude to Christian values in Polish schools? Thank you very much for a very important and very interesting question. Yes, Poles in Lithuania, I would say they are not only very organized, but we try to be a role model in our activity, in our belief. And we have been lucky to live in a country of, in the capital of Jesus' mercy, merciful Jesus. Vilnius is inhabited largely by Poles, and we are blessed to be living in Vilnius. I think that belief is very important in schools, and now when parents choose a school for their children, not only the subjects that are taught in school are important, but also that religion is taught in schools where the language of instruction is Polish. So it means that children from a very early age will develop Christian values. We are the party which is called Electoral Action of Poles, a Christian Families Alliance, and for us it is important not only to declare Christian values but also to actively implement the values. And the efforts of politicians and the support of families gives very nice results. And that's why we have, in Lithuania, we have 10% of gymnasiums in Lithuania where the language of instruction is Polish, and Christian values are actively encouraged. And thank you very much.
Thank you. It was Czesław Olszewski's answer to the viewer's question. And now we have a question from Alicja Ashklarska to the member of the parliament, Rita Tomaszunian. Not long ago, the EPLCFA defended a traditional family in the parliament, and the draft law on partnership was dismissed. What other actions are taken to implement Christian values by EPLCFA? So the last news from our parliament show that we won a small battle, but a long fight is against us, because liberal parliamentarians intend to submit for the second time the bill in the autumn session. But the majority in the parliament supported the society's opinion that we do not need this law in Lithuania, so now we make every effort to defend the colleagues from other fractions who feel a great pressure because they voted against the law on partnership. And I would like to say that we're right about it, and we have a lot of arguments. We plan to organize meetings and discussions on the issues in order to show that the true path for Lithuania should be related to values. Another important aspect is that in order to respond the needs of people who cohabitate, and we can support them in their rights. These rights can be implemented via the civil code, namely the book number 6 of our civil code. And as to the marriages of the same sex people, we just reject this opportunity, and we will make every effort not to approve this law. This was the response by Rita Tomaszunian to the question posed by our viewers. Unfortunately, we can ask only so many questions. And now I would like to ask the member of the European Parliament, Waldemar Tomaszewski, the leader of the EPLCFA, for the final remarks. I would like to extend my sincere gratitude to you, Ms. Miroslava, our members of the Parliament, the members of our party, my colleagues in the European Parliament who participated in our conference. And I believe that very important topics were discussed here, the topics that are important for our future, which are important for Europe as a political union. So Everyone said that the European Union should be the union of European nations. And this was stated back in 1949 or 1950. And even more important thing are values. What Europe will like, what values we should follow. We shouldn't reinvent the wheel. Everything has been invented and stated. We just should take this truth and use it. So what is the truth? It's Jesus Christ who said that I'm the path, I'm the truth and life. We should understand that. If we understand that, we will achieve a lot. And as St. Augustus said, when the God is in the first place, everything is in its right place. So we hope that everything is in its right place in Europe. Thank you very much. Everything is very simple. Unfortunately, we are approaching the end of our conference, and we listened to the final address by Waldemar Tomaszewski. And the meeting in Vilnius is not the end. We've covered already 2/3 of the European route, and I would like to invite the leader of the Vox delegation in the European Parliament, Jorge Bujade, MEP, and for his invitation. Good afternoon, Vilnius. Congratulations for this magnificent event, and thank you for your great hospitality. Thank you for providing this opportunity to participate. The European project is under threat, and we have a responsibility to explain that we are the alternative to save it. Europeans do not want more money. Unfortunately, we cannot hear the interpretation from Spanish. The future of Europe is not climate change. It's not what. If you will not be happy if Europe takes the wrong path. The future of Europe is not globalism. The future of Europe is in Vilnius, in Lithuania. The future of Europe is in Spain, in Madrid. And all the citizens who get up early, who go forward to make their countries to flourish. The future of Europe is in their families. And the future of Europe is in traditions, in sovereignty, in unique identity. The future of Europe is in the homeland. It's in Madrid. And our turn is on the 25th of May. And globalism is the homeland. Europeans do not want more federalism or more money. Well, the present allows us to enjoy the moment, but in order to achieve our dreams, we have to think about the future. To think about the common future of Europe for all of us, which we have to build not only for ourselves, but also for future generations. And when we are very keen and confident, we give all of ourselves away. We put all of effort into achieving our goal, and it gives us confidence and an enormous amount of positive energy. I'm sure that this Vilnius conference, intended for the future of Europe, is an excellent proof of this. Thank you for participating. May I thank the viewers, and see you in Spain.
There's a new hope for Europe, a Europe of jobs, prosperity, and recovery. A Europe that safeguards its citizens and borders. There's a Europe that respects its national democracies, that protects the environment and nurtures its rural economies. There's a Europe that does less and does it better, that cuts bureaucracy and adds value for you. There's a Europe that looks inwards and outwards, for trade, for security, and for friendship. It's time to get Europe under control and back on track. It's time for a new hope for Europe. It's time to reset EU.